You do not know your level." The manager said it loud enough for the customers to hear, and the customers smiled, and Adaeze kept her eyes on the floor she had just finished cleaning. She had worked in that jewelry shop for 11 months. She knew every stone in every case by heart, and every single day they reminded her she was only there to carry buckets, not to dream. She did not know that the quiet old woman sitting in the corner, the one in the faded wrapper that everyone had tried to chase out, was watching all of it, counting, remembering. By the end of the month, every person who had laughed in that shop would learn exactly who they had been laughing at. If you believe how you treat people when no one important is watching is the truest measure of who you are, subscribe, drop a like, and tell me where you're watching from. Now let me tell you the story of Adaeze. The shop was called Verana Fine Jewels, and it sat on Adaeze Street in Victoria Island, behind 2 glass doors so clean you could not tell they were there until you walked into them. Inside, everything was cold. Cold air from the conditioner, cold marble under your shoes, cold faces behind the counters, the kind of place where a security man in a black suit looked at your shoes before he looked at your face and decided right there whether you were a buyer or a problem. Adaeze was 26. She had a diploma in business administration that she had paid for herself 1 semester at a time, working nights at a bakery in Yaba while she studied. When she came to Verana, she came as a sales assistant. That was the title on the letter. In practice, by her 2nd week, she had become the girl they sent for everything nobody else wanted to do. "Adaeze, the toilet on the 2nd floor is smelling. Adaeze, go and buy small chops for the staff meeting. And no change, Wahala, oh. Adaeze, Madam Chiamaka wants her dry cleaning before 2 o'clock. She did all of it. She did it because the salary, small as it was, paid for her younger brother Emeka's school fees in Enugu. And because her late mother had told her, in the last year of her life, that a person's character is the one thing poverty cannot take from you unless you hand it over yourself. So Adaeze held on to hers with both hands. Her manager was Chiamaka, a woman of about 40 who wore her success like a weapon. Chiamaka had clawed her way up from the same kind of beginning Adaeze came from, a fact she had buried so deep that she now genuinely believed she had been born behind that counter. And there is a particular cruelty in people who have escaped something and decided to forget the climb. They kick the ladder. They kick it hard, because every poor person who comes after them is a mirror they would rather not look into. When Adaeze made a sale, and she made many, because she was patient and she actually listened to customers, Chiamaka had a system. She would step in at the last moment, the moment of payment, and put her own staff code into the till. The commission, the small percentage that should have been Adaeze's, would land in Chiamaka's pocket instead. "You did not close it," Chiamaka would say, smiling. "The way you smile at a child who has asked for too much. I closed it. You only talked." And the senior staff, 3 women named Bisola, Funka, and Halima, learned from their ogre and copied her. They took Adaeze's customers. They laughed at her 2 work blouses, which she washed and ironed every night so they would look like more than 2. They gave her the standing shifts, the long ones, the ones that left her ankles swollen by closing time. "See her shoe," Bisola said one morning, loud in front of a customer. "Ordinary cleaner is wearing canvas to Verana. God forbid bad thing." Adaeze said nothing. She had learned that silence was a roof you could stand under when it was raining insults. But understand me well. This is not a story about a girl who suffered quietly and got rescued. I want to be honest with you before we go further. The world is full of kind people who suffer quietly and are never rescued. And a story that pretends kindness always gets a mansion at the end is a lie that does a disservice to every good person still struggling. So watch carefully what Adaeze actually does in this story. Watch the choices she makes when no reward is in sight, because the reward is not the point. The character is the point. The reward, when it comes, is only the world finally catching up to what was already true. Now, the old woman. It was a Tuesday morning in the middle of the rainy season. The kind of Lagos morning where the sky cannot decide what it wants, grey and heavy. The gutters already singing. The shop had just opened. There were 2 customers inside, a young couple looking at engagement rings. when the glass door pushed open and a woman walked in slowly. She was old, maybe 70. Her wrapper was a faded green, the pattern washed almost to nothing, and her blouse did not match it. Her slippers were the cheap rubber kind from the market, the type that cost less than a bottle of soft drink. Her hair was covered with a scarf, tied the old way, the village way. She carried a small black handbag against her chest with both hands, the way a woman carries a bag when she has learned the hard way that the world will take what it can from her. She stood near the door, looking around at the bright cases blinking in the cold light. Halima reached her first. "Aha, madam." She said the word madam like it tasted bad. "I think you are lost. The bus stop is outside, not here." The old woman smiled, a small, patient smile. "No, my daughter, I am not lost. I only want to look." "Look?" Funke had come over now, arms folded. "Look with what eye? This place is not a museum, Mama. The things here, one of them, is more than your whole village put together." The young couple by the ring counter glanced over and looked away quickly, the way comfortable people look away from something they would rather not have to think about. Chiamaka heard the voices and came out from the back. Her heels announced her before her face did, clicking across the marble like a clock counting down to something. She took one look at the old woman, the faded wrapper, the rubber slippers, and her whole body changed. Her chin lifted. Her nostrils did that small flare that Adaeze had seen 100 times, always pointed at people who could not fight back. "Who let this woman inside?" Chiamaka said. Not even to the old woman, but over her head, to the room. "Where is the security, Musa? Musa, come and see your work." "I have not done anything," the old woman said quietly. "You are breathing my conditioned air for free, that is what you have done." Chiamaka stepped closer, looking the old woman up and down with open disgust. "Mama, with all due respect, you do not belong here. This is Verana. We serve a certain kind of person. You are carrying the whole village market on your wrapper. People will come in and think we have become a roadside shop. Please, the door is behind you. And here is the thing about cruelty in public. It is contagious. It gives other people permission." Vizola laughed. Funke laughed. Even the young man at the ring counter let a small smile escape before his fiancée pinched him. The old woman did not shout. She did not argue. She just stood there, holding her handbag, and something in her old eyes went very still and very far away, the way a person's eyes go when they are no longer surprised by anything human beings do to each other. And from the side of the room, where she had been kneeling to wipe a smudge off the bottom of a display case, Adaeze stood up. She did not make a speech. People who are genuinely kind rarely make speeches. She just walked over, and she put herself, gently, between the old woman and Chiamaka. "Good morning, Ma," Adaeze said to the old woman. Her voice was soft, the way you would speak to your own grandmother. "Welcome. Please, come and sit down. You look tired." The room went quiet for a second. Adaeze, Chiamaka's voice was a warning. "What do you think you are doing?" "She is a guest, Ma," Adaeze said simply, not turning around. "She came into a shop. People come into shops." She took the old woman by the arm so lightly and led her to one of the cushioned chairs reserved for serious buyers, the ones nobody had ever once offered to a woman in rubber slippers. She helped her sit. She knelt a little so they were at eye level. "Let me bring you water, Ma. This Lagos heat is wicked, even with the conditioner." "Thank you, my daughter," the old woman said. And she looked at Adaeze for a long moment, the way you look at the first familiar face after a long time among strangers. Adaeze went to the back, past Bisbola, who hissed at her, past Funke, who muttered, "Attention seeker," and she filled a glass with cold water from the dispenser that was officially for customers only. She brought it back on a small tray, with a serviette folded under it, because that was how you served someone with respect. And respect does not check the price of a person's slippers first. The old woman drank slowly. Her hands shook a little around the glass. When she finished, she set it down and looked up. "What is your name?" "Adaeze, Ma. Adaeze." The old woman repeated it like she was it somewhere safe. "Daughter of a king. Do you know that is what your name means?" "My mother used to tell me," Adaeze said, and something flickered across her face. Quick, gone. She said it was a promise she could not afford to keep. But she gave me the name anyway, so I would never forget what I was worth. The old woman was quiet. Then she said, "Your mother was wise." "She was, Ma. She passed 3 years ago. I am sorry." And the old woman said it like she meant it, not like a thing you say to fill a silence. Behind them, Chiamaka had had enough. "Okay, this is now a family meeting. Adaeze, when you finish entertaining your visitor, the second floor display needs cleaning. And Mama," she turned to the old woman, "I am sorry, but you have had your water, you have had your rest, now you have to go. We have real customers coming." The old woman set down the empty glass. She looked at Chiamaka, and there was nothing afraid in her look. "Before I go," she said, "let me ask one thing. I want to buy something." The whole shop seemed to inhale. Then Funke laughed, sharp and ugly. "Buy? Buy what, Mama? Buy the dust on the floor? Even that one you cannot afford." "I want," the old woman went on, calm, as if Funke had not spoken, "to see your finest pieces. The gold. The good stones. Bring out the best you have." And now there was a problem. Because there is a rule in shops, like Verana, an unwritten one, that the customer is always the customer, even when you have decided in your heart they are wasting your time. To refuse outright is risky. So Chiamaka did what people like her do. She turned it into sport. "Fine," she said, and the cruelty in her smile was almost admiring of itself. "You want to see the best? Adaeze, since you love her so much. Show your customer our best pieces. All of them. Let her shop." She folded her arms and leaned against the counter to enjoy the show. "This will be good." Bisola and Funke exchanged a look and settled in to watch, the way people settle in to watch someone fail. But Adaeze did not see it as a joke. That was the thing about her that they never understood, the thing that was, in the end, the whole point of her. She did not perform kindness for an audience, and switch it off when the audience laughed. The old woman had asked to see the jewelry, so Adaeze would show her the jewelry, properly, with both hands, the way she would show it to anyone. "Of course, Ma," she said. "Come with me to the main counter. Let me show you what we have." For the next 40 minutes, Adaeze did her job better than anyone in that shop had ever done it. She brought out the gold bangles from Italy and explained the weight, the carat, why one shone differently from another. She laid out the diamond sets on the black velvet so the stones caught the light. She found earrings to match a necklace the old woman's eye had lingered on. She did not rush, she did not patronize. She treated this woman in rubber slippers exactly the way Chiamaka treated a senator's wife, with patience and attention, and the small, respectful jokes that make a person feel like a person and not a transaction. The old woman watched her more than she watched the jewelry. That was clear if anyone had been paying attention. She asked Adaeze questions, and the questions were not really about gold. "Do you like working here, my daughter?" "It is work, Ma. Work is a blessing." A careful answer. An honest one underneath. "They treat you well?" A pause. "They treat me," Adaeze said, and left it there, and the old woman understood everything in the space she left. At the end of it, the old woman pointed, slowly, deliberately, at the most beautiful pieces on the counter. A diamond necklace. A matching set of bangles. A pair of earrings. Drop rings. 10 pieces in total, the cream of the whole shop. "These ones," she said. "I will take all of these." Adaeze blinked. She could not stop a small jump in her chest. Not because of commission, she knew Chiamaka would steal that, but because for one moment, just one, she let herself imagine that this strange, kind morning might turn into something good for the old woman too. That maybe this was someone's grandmother whose son had finally made it, and she had come to buy herself the things a hard life had never allowed. "All 10, Ma. Let me total it for you." Adaeze's fingers moved over the calculator. She added it carefully, twice. "It comes to 412 million. 300,000 naira, Ma. 412 million. 300,000. She said the number plainly, no mockery in it. Just the truth of what the woman had chosen. The shop went silent again, but it was a different silence now, a waiting one. Chiamaka pushed off the counter, her arms still folded, the smile on her face stretching toward its punchline. The old woman patted the side of her faded wrapper, then the other side. She opened the small black handbag and looked inside it, and her face changed, became confused, then embarrassed, then small. "Oh!" she said quietly. "Oh, my daughter, I am sorry. I have come without my money. I forgot it. I forgot it at home." And the shop erupted. The laughter came out of them like something that had been waiting all morning to be let loose. Funke actually clapped. Bizola bent over, holding her stomach. Halima wiped her eye. Even Musa, the security man by the door, allowed himself a chuckle. "I knew it," Kima crowed, walking forward now, alive with it. "I knew it! I knew it! 400 million! This woman weigh her slippers cost 200 naira. She wanted to taste being rich for 40 minutes. She rounded on Adaeze, and her voice dropped into something colder. "And you? You stood there and pulled out our best diamonds for a beggar. Do you know if one of these stones fell and got lost, your whole life's salary cannot pay for it? Are you mad? Are you actually mad?" Adaeze did not answer. She was looking at the old woman. And the old woman was not laughing, of course. She was sitting very still, her hands now folded in her lap, her chin tucked down, and on her old face was an expression Adaeze recognized instantly, because she had worn it herself, in markets, in offices, on buses, in this very shop. It was the face of a person being laughed at by a room full of people who have decided you do not count. Something in Adaeze went quiet and certain. She began carefully to pack the jewelry back into its boxes. The diamonds, the bangles, the earrings, each one returned to its velvet bed, gently, without drama. And while she did it, she spoke to the old woman. In a normal voice, the same warm voice as before, as if the entire shop were not howling around them. "It is no problem, Ma. These things, they will still be here tomorrow. They are not going anywhere." She closed the last box. "Sometimes we forget our money at home. It happens to everybody. It even happens to the big customers. You would be surprised." "Adaeze," Chiamaka snapped. "Stop comforting her. Have some shame." Adaeze stood up straight. And then she did the thing that none of them expected, the thing they would all remember later, each one of them, in the middle of the night, with a different feeling. She reached into the pocket of her uniform, and she took out her own money. Folded notes, soft from being handled, the transport money she kept for the Danfo home, and the small evening food she would buy on the way. It was not much. It was, in fact, almost everything she had until payday, which was still 9 days away. She counted out a portion of it, and she pressed it gently into the old woman's hand, and she closed the old woman's fingers around it the way you do when you do not want a person to be able to refuse. "Take this, Ma, for your transport home, so you do not stress yourself looking for bus fare, and buy yourself something small to eat on the way. Please, don't worry about today. Today was a good day. You came, you saw beautiful things, you rested. That is enough." The laughter died. It did not fade. It died all at once, the way laughter dies when something real walks into the room and everyone suddenly feels the cheapness of what they were doing a moment ago. Funke looked at the floor. Bizola's smile hung on her face with nowhere to go. Even Chiamaka, for 1 second, just one, did not know what to say. The old woman looked down at the money in her hand. Then she looked up at Adaeze, and her old eyes were shining, wet at the edges. "My daughter," she said, and her voice had gone rough. "Do you know how many people I have met in my long life? More than I can count. And I can tell you, the truly good ones, the ones who are kind when there is nothing in it for them, when there is everything to lose by it, I can count those ones on my fingers." She pressed Adaeze's hand. "You are one of them. God will not forget this. I will not forget this." "It is nothing, Ma," Adaeze said, embarrassed now, because genuinely kind people are always embarrassed by their own kindness. "Let me walk you to the door." But Chiamaka had recovered, and humiliation in a person like Chiamaka does not turn into shame, it turns into rage. Because she had felt it in that 1 second, the smallness of herself next to this cleaner, and she could not forgive Adaeze for making her feel it. No. Chiamaka stepped between them, her voice shaking. "No, no, no. You will not walk her anywhere. Adaeze, you are giving away money in my shop. You have turned my Verana into a charity. You brought this filth in. You wasted 40 minutes of selling time. You exposed our best stock to a roadside beggar, and now you are doing Mother Teresa on top?" Her voice climbed. "I have warned you and warned you. You do not have what it takes to be here. You do not know your level, and you have refused to learn it. You think kindness will pay the rent on this shop? Get your bag, you are fired. Pack your things and get out of my sight before I call the police and say you stole. The word fired landed in the cold air and just sat there. Adaeze did not beg. That is important. She did not fall to the floor and hold Chiamaka's legs the way the women in the films do. She'd had begged for things in her life that mattered. Medicine for her mother, an extension on her brother's fees, and she knew the difference between a thing worth begging for and a place that had already decided what it thought of her. She turned to the old woman first. I have to go now, Ma. I am sorry I cannot walk you out. Get home safely and don't worry, please. Everything will be fine. Then she went to the back and she took her small bag from the locker, the one with the broken zip she had safety pinned shut, and she put on her canvas shoes that Bizola had mocked, and she walked out through the two invisible glass doors into the grey Lagos morning, into the rain that had finally decided to fall. She did not cry until she reached the bus stop. And even then, she turned her face up into the rain so that no stranger would be able to tell the difference. Now let me tell you who that old woman really was. Her name was Nneka Obiagu, and she had not forgotten her money at home. She had walked into Verana Fine Jewels that morning carrying exactly enough to buy the entire shop and the building it stood in, several times over. But she had not carried it as cash, because no woman of sense carries 400 million nira in a market handbag. She had carried it the way real wealth is carried, quietly, invisibly, in names and signatures and ownership documents, sitting in offices across 3 continents. Mama Nneka was the founder and chairman of the Obiagu Group. And the Obiagu Group, among the many things it owned, the real estate, the logistics, the manufacturing, had 6 months earlier acquired a controlling interest in a struggling luxury retail chain. Verana Fine Jewels was part of that chain. Mama Nneka owned the very shop that had just thrown her out and fired the only person in it who had treated her like a human being. She had not come there by accident. This is the part I want you to hear clearly, because it is what separates this story from a fairy tale and makes it something that could happen in the real world. Mama Nneka did not have magic. She had a method. For 50 years she had run her businesses on one stubborn belief. A belief everyone around her thought was sentimental and old-fashioned. She believed that you could not tell how a company truly behaved by reading its reports. Reports are written to be read by bosses. They are clean. They lie politely. The only way to know how a business really treats people, she always said, is to become, for one morning, the kind of person it is allowed to mistreat. So twice a year, without warning, without her drivers or her assistants or her good clothes, Mama Nneka would put on an old wrapper and a pair of market slippers, and she would walk into one of her own businesses as a nobody, a test, not of the products, of the hearts. She called it her morning of truth. She had done it for decades. She had seen over those years a great deal of human behavior, and most of it had not surprised her. She had been ignored, hissed at, chased, condescended to. She had also, now and then, been treated with simple decency by people who had no idea who she was, and every single one of those people had risen in her companies, because Mama Nneka had learned the one thing that all her money had finally taught her, which is that competence is common but character is rare, and a business is only ever as good as the worst thing its weakest member is allowed to do to someone who cannot fight back. She got into a plain taxi outside Verana, gave the driver an address in Ikoyi, and as the car pulled into the wet traffic, she opened her old handbag and looked at the soft folded notes Adaeze had pressed into her hand. Transport money. From a girl who had just been fired and had 9 days until payday. She closed her hand around it, and she looked out the window for a long time, and the driver, glancing in his mirror, thought the old woman was crying, and could not imagine why. When the taxi turned through a gate that the driver had assumed must be the wrong address, because no woman dressed like this lived behind gates like these, Mama Nneka paid him double the fare, thanked him by name, and walked up the steps of a house that could have swallowed Verana whole. Her grandson was waiting in the front room. His name was Obiora Obiagu, 34 years old, the group's chief executive for the last 4 years, since Mama Nneka had stepped back from the daily running of it, though everyone knew she still held the reins where it counted. Obiora was the kind of man people described carefully. Brilliant, yes. Driven, certainly. But cold, they said when they thought he could not hear. A man who had grown up with so much money that he had stopped quite believing other people were entirely real. He ran the numbers, he closed the deals, and he had not, in some years, looked at a person and seen a person, rather than a position on an organizational chart. He had been worried. His grandmother had gone out alone again in those clothes, telling no one where. He hated her morning of truth ritual. He thought it was beneath her and dangerous, and he had told her so many times. Grandma, he stood when she came in. 4 hours. 4 hours, and your phone off. We agreed you would carry the small phone at least. Sit down, Obiora. She lowered herself slowly into her chair, and something in her voice made him sit. I went to Verana this morning, the one on Adaeze, the jewelry shop, the one in the chain we bought. He frowned. How was it? They threw me out, Mama Naneka said. The room got very quiet. Obiora was still for a moment, and then a muscle moved in his jaw. They what? They laughed at me, Obiora. From the moment I came in, the manager, a woman, she told me I carry the village on my wrapper. She said I do not belong, that I should follow the door behind me. The senior girls, they followed her, the way junior people always follow a cruel boss. They laughed at my slippers. They laughed at my bag. She said it without anger, flatly, like a witness. It was not a small thing, my son. It was the kind of treatment that, if I had been who I appeared to be, an old woman with nothing would have followed me out the door and into the rest of a hard day, and they would have forgotten my face before I reached the bus stop. Obiora's hands had closed slowly into fists on the arms of his chair. Give me the names, today. I will clear out that entire shop by closing. Wait. Mama Naneka raised one hand. There is more, and the more is the reason I came home smiling, even though I came home thrown out. She told him then about Adaeze, the girl who stood up, the water, the chair, the 40 minutes of patient, dignified services to a woman everyone else had written off, the way she had packed the diamonds away without one word of mockery, and then last, the money. The transport money pressed into an old woman's hand by a girl who did not know she would still have a job tomorrow, and who, it turned out, no longer did. They fired her for it, Mama Naneka finished. While I was still standing there, the manager fired her. For being kind to me. For wasting selling time on a beggar. The last thing that girl did before they sent her out into the rain was tell me not to worry, that everything would be fine. Obiora did not say anything for a long moment. You want her rewarded, he said finally. It was not quite a question. I want, said Mama Naneka, to understand her. Money I can throw at anybody. I have thrown money at problems my whole life, and it solves the small ones and ruins the big ones. No, I want to know who this girl is, where she comes from, what she is made of. Because, Obiora, and here the old woman leaned forward, and her eyes had that far, clear look again. In 50 years of my morning of truth, I have been shown kindness by strangers maybe a dozen times, but I have never, not once, been given a person's last money by someone who had just lost everything for giving it. That is not ordinary kindness. That is something I do not have a name for. And I have learned over a long life that when you meet something you cannot name, you do not reward it and send it away. You pay attention to it, because it is trying to teach you something. What Obiora did next, he did not do with magic. He did it with the boring, real tools that powerful people actually use. He asked his head of human resources for the personnel file of one Adaeze, sales assistant, Verana Adaeze branch, terminated that morning. He asked, separately and quietly, for the security camera footage from the shop floor, which every branch kept by law and which no one had thought to wipe. That evening Obiora sat alone in his study and watched it. He watched it the way he watched everything, looking for the angle, the catch, the performance. He had grown up surrounded by people who were kind when he was watching, and something else when he was not, and he had stopped trusting kindness a long time ago. So he watched Adaeze on the silent footage, expecting, somewhere, the moment when she looked at the camera, the moment where the act showed itself. It never came. He watched her kneel to wipe a case nobody had told her was dirty. He watched her stand up when the old woman came in. He watched the manager and the senior staff laugh, their mouths open, their faces ugly in the way. Faces are when they think no one important is looking. He watched the girl put herself between them and the old woman. He watched the 40 minutes of careful service, the patience of it, the way she angled the velvet tray so the light would catch the stones, the small kindnesses of someone doing a job properly for a person who could give her nothing. And then he watched her take out her own money, soft-folded notes, count it, and press it into a stranger's hand. There was no camera glance. There was no audience she was playing to. The only audience was a room full of people mocking her, and she had done it anyway. Obiora played that last part again, then again. He was a man who, his whole adult life, had been approached by people who wanted something from him, who smiled at him because of what he could give, who performed warmth like a transaction. And here was a girl who did not know he existed, performing nothing, giving away what little she had to someone she believed could never repay her, and getting fired for it in real time. He sat in the dark for a long while after the screen went black. The next morning he told his grandmother, "I want to meet her." It took 2 days to find her, and this part also was not magic. It was a phone number on a personnel form, a careful call from HR, an offer she at first did not believe. Adaeze nearly hung up, certain it was one of the kidnapping scams that prey on jobless people in Lagos. It was Mama Nneka's voice on a second call that convinced her, the old woman from the shop. Except now the old woman was saying things that made no sense. About a group, about a meeting, about a car that would come. A car did come. A clean grey car, not flashy, with a driver in a plain shirt who called her Ma and opened the door for her and did not look at her shoes, and it carried her, frightened and clutching her safety pin bag, through gates she could not believe were opening for her, to a house she could not believe was a house. And at the top of the steps, beside a tall, serious, expensively quiet man she did not yet know, stood the old woman from the shop, except the wrapper was gone. In its place was a simple, beautiful gown, and around the old woman now was the unmistakable air of a person whom rooms rearranged themselves for. Adaeze stopped on the steps. Her mind did the arithmetic slowly and refused to believe the answer. "Ma?" she said. Adaeze. Mama Nneka came down to her, took both her hands. "Daughter of a king, come inside. There are things I have to tell you, and the first one is that I owe you an apology, because I let you be punished for being good to me, and I am old enough to know better than to let that stand." They sat in a room larger than the flat Adaeze shared with 2 other girls in Surulere. A steward brought small chops and tea on a tray, and Adaeze did not touch them, because she could not make her hands work, because she was certain that at any moment someone would walk in and say it had all been a mistake, that the cleaner had wandered into the wrong dream. Mama Nneka told her everything, the morning of truth, the 50 years of it, who she really was. Who the quiet man in the corner was, Obiora, her grandson, the chief executive, who had not yet said a single word, and who was watching Adaeze with the unsettling steadiness of a man trying to read a language he had only just discovered existed. When she understood, finally, that the shop which had thrown her out was owned by the very woman she had given her transport money, Adaeze put her hand over her mouth and laughed. Once, helplessly, and then her eyes filled. "Ma, if I had known who you were, I would have been afraid to come near you." "I know," Mama Nneka said gently. "That is exactly why I never tell them. The kindness you give to someone you think can do nothing for you, that is the only kindness that is real. Everything else is investment." Then Obiora spoke for the first time. His voice was lower than Adaeze expected, and more careful. "Miss Adaeze, I watched the footage from that morning. All of it." He paused. "I want to give you something, to set right what was done to you, and because what you did has value, even if you did not do it for value." He nodded to a steward, and the steward brought in things. A set of car keys on a tray, an envelope, the corner of a box that, when opened, would clearly hold jewelry, the same kind she had been packing away 2 days before. "There is a car," Obiora said. "There is money, enough that you do not have to worry for a long time. There is a pix from our own collection. It is yours, all of it. Consider it both an apology and a reward. And here again, watch what Adaeze does. Because this is the moment the fairy tale would have her weep with gratitude and accept, and this is the moment that this story refuses to be a fairy tale. Adaeze looked at the keys and the envelope and the jewelry box for a long moment. Then she shook her head. No, sir, thank you. But no. The room was quiet. Obiora's eyebrows went up, just slightly. It was clear. Not a man often told no, and almost never told no by someone who had 9 days to payday and no job. No, he said. I cannot take it, sir. Adaeze's voice was steady even though her hands were not. Please don't be offended, but if I take this, then everything Madam thinks about me becomes a lie. She just told me the only real kindness is the kind you give to someone who can do nothing for you. If I gave her my transport money and then collected a car and millions for it 2 days later, then it was not kindness. It was the best business deal of my life. She shook her head again. I did not help an old woman so that I could be rich. I helped her because she was being treated the way I am treated every day, and I know what that feels like, and I could not stand there and add my silence to it. That is all. That is the whole thing. If you give me a car for it, you turn it into something it was not. Mama Naneka, across the room, closed her eyes for a second, and when she opened them, they were wet again, and she was smiling. Obiora sat back slowly. For 4 years, he had run one of the largest private companies in the country. He had sat across the table from men who would lie to his face for a fraction of what was on that tray. And a fired salesgirl was pushing it back across the table at him because accepting it would, in her own mind, make a liar of her conscience. Then what do you want? He asked, and for the first time there was something in his voice that was not cold. It was curiosity, real curiosity. Everyone wants something, Miss Adaeze. Tell me what you want. A job, sir, Adaeze said simply. A fair one. Where what I earn, I earn. Where if I make a sale, the commission is mine and not stolen by my ogre. I want to work. I have a brother in school in Enugu, and I am all he has. I am not looking for someone to carry me. I am looking for a chance to carry myself. That is what I want. If you want to give me something, give me that. And in the silence that followed, something shifted in the room, though none of the 3 of them could have told you exactly what. Mama Neneka had found what she came looking for. Obiora had met something he could not buy, sell, or fully explain, and Adaeze, who had walked in certain she would walk out empty, had instead said the truest thing about herself out loud in front of the 2 most powerful people she had ever met, and not bent. Stay for lunch, Mama Naneka said. Both of you. We will talk about the job. And Adaeze, she added as the girl began, automatically, to protest that she could not impose. In this house, when an old woman asks you to eat, you eat. It is the one law I still enforce. So Adaeze ate, and somewhere over the course of that long, strange, unhurried meal, Obiora Obiagu found himself doing a thing he had not done in years. He listened to a person, not to gather information, not to find the angle, but because what she was saying was interesting, and what she was rare. She told them about her mother, about her brother Emeka, who wanted to be a doctor, who sent her drawings of the human heart with all the parts labeled, about the bakery in Yaba and the diploma she paid for 1 semester at a time. She told it without self-pity, even with a kind of stubborn humor. And Obiora, who had grown up with everything, listened to a woman who had grown up with nothing, and felt for the first time in a long time that he was the one who was poor. The job was real, and it was not charity. Mama Naneka was too wise for charity, which she said was just guilt wearing nice clothes. The group's flagship retail division needed people on the ground who understood customers as human beings, a thing it had clearly, given Verana, forgotten how to do. Adaeze would start there, properly, with a proper salary and a proper title on her own merit, reporting through the normal structure. No special treatment. Mama Naneka was insistent on that, and Adaeze was more insistent still. If they think I got it for sleeping with somebody or for charming the old chairman, I would rather not have it, Adaeze said. Let me earn it where everyone can see I earned it. They will think those things anyway, Obiora said quietly. People always do. Then let me prove them wrong with my work, she said. That is the only answer to a lie that lasts. He looked at her for a moment. Yes, he said. It is. She started 2 weeks later, not at Verana, but at the group's main retail headquarters in Ikoyi, as a customer experience officer, a real title with real responsibilities, on the same pay grade as anyone else who held it. And the whispers came exactly as both she and Obiora had known they would. That is the one, the chairman's pet. They say the old woman just picked her from the road. Customer experience? She was cleaning floors last month, my dear. Last month. Adaeze heard all of it. She had grown up under that roof of insults. She knew how to stand under it, but this time she did something different from before. This time she did not only endure. She answered the whispers the only way that ever actually silences them. She became undeniable. She came early. She learned the entire retail operation from the ground, because she had stood on that ground, and she could see what the people in the offices could not. She saw that the company was bleeding customers not because of price, but because of exactly the disease that had run Verana. A culture where junior staff were taught to judge a customer's worth by their shoes, and where the people who actually faced customers all day were treated like furniture by the people who never did. She wrote a report, a real one, with numbers, odd exact numbers she had counted herself, the kind of numbers that do not come from a textbook. She found that 31% of walk-in customers at 3 branches left without being greeted at all, and that of those, more than half never returned, and she put a Naira figure on what that silence was costing. And the figure was large enough that people who had ignored her stopped ignoring her. Within 4 months, the floor staff who had once whispered about her were quoting her in meetings. Within 6, 2 of her recommendations had become company policy, and the customer return rate at her pilot branch had climbed by a number that made the regional manager, a man who had called her the chairman's pet in March, ask her, in October, with great humility, whether she would consider taking on 2 more branches. She had not been carried. She had walked. Everyone could see she had walked. And that, more than any car or any check, was the reward she had actually wanted. And Obiora watched all of it. He told himself at first that he was watching because his grandmother had taken an interest, and he was managing a risk. But that lie did not survive contact with the facts, and Obiora was, whatever his faults, a man who respected facts. The fact was that he found reasons to be in meetings she was in. The fact was that he read her reports twice, the second time not for the content. The fact was that the cold thing in him, the thing that had decided long ago that people were positions on a chart, had begun, in her presence, to thaw, and he did not entirely know what to do with the feeling, because he had no experience of it and no playbook, and his money was, for once, completely useless. I want to be careful here, because this is where so many of these stories go wrong, and I do not want to insult your intelligence. They have the powerful man fall for the poor girl in an afternoon, propose in a fortnight, and call it love, when it is really just a rich man being charmed by novelty. That is not what happened here, and I think you deserve the truer version. What happened was slower and better. Over the better part of a year, working in the same orbit, Obiora and Adaeze came to know each other the way people actually come to know each other. In disagreements, in long meetings, in the small revealing moments of a shared task, they argued. She told him, to his face in front of his executives, that a cost-cutting plan he favored would gut the very floor staff who were the company's only real connection to its customers. And she was right. And he knew within a day that she was right. And the thing he felt was not offense but relief, because almost no one in 4 years had told him a true thing he did not want to hear. He came to rely on her judgment of people, which was uncanny, because she had spent her life on the side of the counter where you learn to read people fast or get hurt. She came to see, under the cold exterior that the magazines wrote about, a man who had been so insulated by wealth that he had simply never been taught how to be close to anyone, and who was, haltingly, awkwardly, trying to learn. It was respect first. That is the thing I want you to notice. Before it was ever anything else, it was respect, built slowly out of 1,000 small proofs, in both directions. And respect, real respect, is the only foundation that anything lasting is ever built on. The films skip it because it is not dramatic, but it is the whole thing. A love that does not begin in respect is just 2 people taking turns to use each other until the using runs out. When Obiora finally spoke, almost a year after the morning his grandmother came home in rubber slippers, he did not do it grandly. They were working late, the office quiet, the city a field of lights below the window. He said, "I have something to say, and I have been rehearsing it for a month, which should tell you how out of my depth I am." Adaeze looked up. "I have spent my whole life," he said, "around people who were nice to me because of what I am. You are the first person I have ever met who was, in fact, somewhat rude to me." And she laughed, despite herself, because of who I actually am, and was right to be. "Do not want to lose that. I do not want to lose you. I am asking, badly, whether you would consider, some time when you are ready, letting this be something more than work." And Adaeze, who had every reason to leap at it, did not leap. She did the careful thing, the honest thing, the thing that was so completely her. "Obiora, you are my boss's grandson. You are the chief executive. If I say yes, do you know what every single person in that building will believe about me? Everything I have built this year, every report, every late night, all of it becomes a joke. We told you she was sleeping her way up. I have fought that lie since the day I started, and I have nearly killed it, and if I am not careful, you will hand it back to them whole." "I know," he said. "I have thought about it more than you can imagine. So here is what I propose, and you can refuse it." I step back, fully. "From any decision that touches your career, your reporting line moves away from me to the board today, in writing, where anyone can see it. Whatever you become in this company, you become with me having no power over it at all, so that no one, including you, can ever wonder. And then, only then, separately, as two people, and not as a boss and a staff, we see what this is." He paused. "I will not use what I have to win you. That would make me exactly the kind of man you should run from. I will only ask you, as a man with nothing to offer but himself, and let the rest of it be earned, the same way you earn everything. Slowly, in front of everybody." For a long moment she said nothing. Then she said, "On those, slowly, in front of everybody." Not everyone was happy. There was a woman named Ngozi. Ngozi Banaru was the daughter of the late Chief Banaru, who had been Mama Naneka's husband's closest friend and business partner for 30 years before his death. The two families had been intertwined for a generation, and somewhere in that long intertwining, Ngozi had decided, and had made everyone around her decide, that she and Obiora were as good as promised to each other. It was never written anywhere. Obiora had never said it, but Ngozi had said it so often, so confidently, in so many drawing rooms, that it had taken on the weight of a thing that was true. She was elegant and sharp, and she had grown up never once being told no. She maintained a life of designer bags and first-class cabins and long seasons in Europe, and the engine that quietly powered all of it was the assumption, hers and everyone's, that one day she would be Mrs. Obiora Obiagu, and that the Obiagu money would simply continue to be, in effect, her money. So when the rumors reached her, the chairman's protégé, the cleaner the old woman had plucked from a shop floor, now somehow close to Obiora, Ngozi did not take it as gossip. She took it as theft. She came to the Ikoyi office unannounced, in a red dress that cost more than Adaze's annual salary, her heels striking the floor like accusations. She found Adaeze at her desk. "So you are the famous Adaeze." Ngozi looked her over slowly, head to canvas-free but unfashionable shoe, and let her face show exactly what she thought. "I expected something more." "Good afternoon," Adaeze said evenly. "How can I help you?" "You can help me," Ngozi said. "By understanding your level, you are a project. A charity case the old woman picked up to feel good about herself. That is all you are. You think because you wrote one report and smiled at Obiora a few times, you have a future here? Some people are born to sit in offices, my dear, and some are born to carry the buckets. You can put on a nice blouse, but everyone in this building knows which one you are." It was, almost word for word, the language of Verana. The same disease, in a more expensive dress. But Adaeze was not the same girl who had stood on the marble floor with her eyes down. A year of earning her place had put something in her spine that had not been there before. "You came all the way here," Adaeze said, "to tell me I carry buckets. You must be very frightened of me." She said it without heat, which made it worse. "I am not going to argue with you about my level, madam. I have stopped letting other people decide that. If you have business with the company, the front desk will help you. If you came to insult me, you have done it, and you can consider it delivered." She turned back to her screen. "I have work." Ngozi stood there, her mouth slightly open, completely unaccustomed, to being dismissed by furniture. What Ngozi did next is the part of this story where I need you to pay close attention, because it is the engine of everything that follows, and because the way it is finally answered is the whole moral heart of this thing. Ngozi went home and she made a plan. Not a hot, shouting plan, a cold one. She understood that she could not beat Adaeze on character because she did not have any, and she could not beat her on work because she had never done any. So she would beat her the only way people like Ngozi ever win, by manufacturing a lie ugly enough to stick. She knew the Obiagu family kept a private collection, pieces of real value. In the family house, items that came in and out for events and valuations. She knew, because she had been a guest in that house her whole life, exactly where things were kept and how loosely, in the trusting way of old families, they were sometimes watched. And she knew that Adaeze, now, was sometimes a guest there too, invited by Mama Nneka, who had grown to love the girl like the granddaughter she had never had. The plan made itself. A piece would go missing, and it would be found by the right person at the right moment, somewhere that pointed at exactly one person. It happened on a Sunday. Mama Nneka liked to host a quiet family lunch on the last Sunday of the month. A small thing, only family, and the few people she counted as family. Adaeze had been to several by now. She no longer froze on the steps. She helped in the kitchen over Mama Nneka's objections, because that was who she was, and the stewards had come to love her for it. Ngozi had invited herself, as she had every right to do, given the old friendship between the families. She arrived early. She was charming to Mama Nneka, warm to Obiora, and she found at some point during the long afternoon a moment when the corridor to the private rooms was empty. It took her 90 seconds. A glass case in the small upstairs study, unlocked, as such things were in that trusting house. A brooch. Old, set with sapphires, one of the oldest pieces the family owned, a thing of real history and real value, into her bag. And then, later, a second errand when Adaeze was downstairs, laughing with the old woman over something, into the side pocket of Adaeze's handbag, where it sat among the bus tickets and the lip balm and the photo of her brother, like a snake in a basket of bread. The discovery, when it came, was loud. It was Ngozi, of course, who raised the alarm, with a performance worthy of a far better cause. "The Banneroo brooch," she gasped, returning from upstairs where she had gone, she said, to admire it. "It is gone." "Mama, the sapphire brooch, it is not in the case." Consternation. The stewards questioned. The house turned upside down. And then Ngozi, with exquisite theatrical reluctance, her eyes already wet, her voice already trembling with the sorrow of it, suggested that perhaps, before anyone called anyone, they should simply quietly, to rule it out, you understand, check everyone's bags. Hers first. She insisted hers first. She opened her own bag with a flourish, empty, of course. And then they came to Adaeze's bag, and there it was. The room, which had been full of noise, went silent. Adaeze stared at the brooch in her own handbag and did not understand. For a full 3 seconds she genuinely did not understand, the way your mind refuses a thing that cannot be, and then she understood, and the understanding was worse than the brooch. "I did not put that there." Her voice came out small, and she heard how small it was, and hated it. "I have never seen this before in my life." "Ma, I did not. I would never." "Of course you would say that." Ngozi's grief had evaporated with impressive speed. Underneath it was something close to joy. "They always say that." "Mama, I am so sorry. I am so sorry." I did not want to believe it either. But you see now? Yeah, you see what she is? You take a person from the gutter, you bring them into your home, and this is the thanks. A family heirloom in the cleaner's bag. I tried to warn everyone. I tried. And around the room, you could see it happen. You could see the doubt enter. Because a brooch in a bag is a hard fact, and the human heart is a coward, and it is so much easier to believe the worst of the person who has the least. One of the cousins looked away from Adaeze, then another. The temperature of the room turned against her, and she felt it turn, The old familiar cold of being the one nobody will stand near. Except this time the stakes were not a job. This time it was her name. The one thing her mother had told her poverty could never take unless she handed it over. Adaeze looked at Obiora, and Obiora's face for one terrible moment was unreadable. I am going to be honest with you about that moment, because the cheap version of this story would have Obiora believe in her instantly, gaze at her with perfect trust, and it would be a lie, and you would feel it was a lie even if you could not say why. The truth is that Obiora felt the doubt too, just for a second. He was a man who had been deceived before, who had built his whole cold life on the assumption that people perform goodness and hide their real selves, and here was a hard fact in a handbag, and the old fear rose up in him and whispered, "What if you were the fool all along?" It was Mama Naneka who broke it. Mama Naneka who had not moved, who had been watching the way she always watched, with eyes that had seen 50 years of human beings at their worst. "Stop," she said. One word. The room stopped. She walked slowly into the middle of it, and she looked not at Adaeze, but at the brooch, and then at the bag, and then, for a long, long moment, at Ngozi. "Everybody be quiet," Mama Neka said, "and let an old woman think. Now, here is where this story refuses, again, to be a fairy tale, and where it tries instead to teach you something real that you can actually use in your own life. In the cheap version, the truth comes out by magic, a confession. A villain who suddenly, conveniently, breaks down and admits everything because the plot needs her to. That is not how the world works, and a story that teaches you to wait for villains to confess is teaching you to lose. Liars do not confess, liars dig in." Ngozi was not going to crack under a stern look. What actually defeats a lie is not emotion. It is evidence and process and the patience to use them, and that is what this family had. Underneath the money, a serious house, and a serious house does not convict a person on the basis of where an object was found. It asks how it got there. "3 things, Mama Neka said, holding up 3 old fingers. 3 things before anyone in this house says the word thief again, because that word, once you say it about a person's, you can never fully take back, and I will not have it said in my home on the strength of a handbag. 1. This brooch lives in a locked case in the upstairs study. Adaeze has never once in her life been in that study. She has been in my kitchen, my parlor, my garden. She would not know that room exists. So how does a girl steal a thing from a room she has never entered? 2. If you were a thief and you had stolen something this valuable, would you carry it in the open side pocket of your bag, at a lunch, in a house full of people, where any hand could find it? Or would you hide it on your body deep and walk out and only breathe again at the gate? A real thief hides a thing well. This brooch was not hidden. This brooch was placed. There is a difference, and 50 years has taught me to see it. And 3. And here Mama Neka turned fully and looked at Ngozi, and her old voice was very soft and very terrible. 3. Who found it? Who raised the alarm? Who went upstairs alone to admire a brooch, and came down screaming it was missing? Who insisted, of all things, that we search the bags, and insisted her own be searched first, so that her own being empty would make her look innocent? In my long life, my dear, I have noticed one thing about people who are very, very eager to search for a stolen item. Very often it is because they already know precisely where it will be found. The silence in that room changed its shape entirely. Njuzesi's face did a thing then, a small thing, a flicker, the briefest crack, there and gone. But a room full of people saw it. And Obiora, whose moment of doubt had lasted exactly 1 second before his actual judgment caught up with him, saw it most clearly of all, and felt a cold fury settle over him that was far worse than any shouting. "We do not have to guess," Obiora said quietly. "Grandmother is right that we should not accuse on a handbag. So we will not. We will look." He took out his phone. Not to call the police. To do the boring, devastating thing that actually wins. "This house," he said, "like every Obiagu property, has cameras. In the corridors. On the stairs. Not in the private rooms, out of respect, but in every hallway that leads to them. The study door opens onto a corridor. Anyone who went into that study today to take a brooch or to admire it walked down that corridor, on camera, with a timestamp, and the footage is on a server I can reach from this telephone. He looked up, and he looked at Ngozi, and he was no longer cold. He was something far more frightening, which was calm. So, before I open it, and the whole afternoon plays back in front of everyone, second by second, with the times on the screen, is there anything anyone would like to say? Now, while saying it is still a choice and not a thing the camera says for you. You have never heard a silence like the one in that room. Adaeze did not speak. She had stopped trembling. Something in Mama Thaneka's 3 fingers and Obiara's calm phone had restored to her the one thing the brooch had tried to take, the certainty of her own innocence, and she held it now and waited. Ngozi's eyes went to the phone, to the door, to the cousins, who were no longer looking away from Adaeze. They were, all of them, looking at her. The whole geometry of the room had quietly rotated, in the space of 2 minutes, off the poor girl and onto the rich one, the way it should have from the start, the way it almost never does in real life without someone wise enough and powerful enough to turn it. This is absurd, Ngozi tried. Her voice had lost its grief and not yet found anything to replace it. You are going to humiliate me, a Banaru, in front of over A. You would take the word of A. Say the word, Obiora said. Say cleaner, say it one more time, and then watch the camera and let us all see together who was upstairs. His thumb moved toward the screen. Stop. It came out of Ngozi cracked and ugly. Stop. Do not play it. And the whole room exhaled, because that right there, was the only confession a liar ever really gives. Not the words, the stop. The frantic, instinctive stop, the moment the camera becomes more dangerous than the truth. It came apart quickly after that, the way these things do once the first stone is pulled out. Obiora played the footage anyway. Not for cruelty. For the record. Because a serious house does not let an accusation hang in the air half-answered, and because Adaeze deserved more than Ngozi's stop. She deserved to have it proven, in front of every face that had turned cold against her, that she had done nothing. So the corridor played on the small screen, with the timestamps marching across the bottom, and there was Ngozi at 2:14 in the afternoon, walking into the study empty-handed, and there she was at 2:16, walking out with her bag held differently, closer, and there, later at 3:41, was Ngozi again, slipping toward the parlor where the guests' bags had been left, while downstairs, on no camera but in everyone's memory, Adaeze had been at that exact moment in the garden, in full view of 9 people, laughing with Mama Naneka about the old woman's stubborn refusal to use a walking stick. There is no arguing with a timestamp. Ngozi did not try. She sat down, finally, in one of Mama Naneka's good chairs, and the elegant fury went out of her, and what was left was just a frightened woman who had gambled everything on a brooch and lost. Why? Mama Naneka asked. Only that. Why? And Ngozi, who had nothing left to protect, told a kind of truth at last. Because she was taking it. All of it. The thing that was supposed to be mine. I have spent my whole life being the girl who would marry Obiora. Everyone knew it. It was the one thing I was. And then a nobody walks in off a shop floor, and in 1 year she has more of this family's love than I have had in 30, and I could not just watch it. It was never yours, Obiora said, and he said it without anger now, almost gently, which was worse. Ngozi, hear me, because I should have said this to you years ago, and my silence helped build the lie you have lived inside, and for that part, I am sorry. We were never engaged. I never asked you. I never gave you any word. You built a whole life on a thing that did not exist, and the people around us let you. Because it was convenient, and I let you. Because confronting it was awkward, and I chose my own comfort over your truth, and that was wrong of me. But understand it clearly now, finally. I do not belong to you. I never did. No person belongs to another by assumption. And what you did today, you did not do it because you love me. People who love you do not try to destroy an innocent person to keep you. You did it because you love the life, and you were afraid of losing the money. Those are not the same thing, and I think somewhere you have always known they are not. Now, the question of what to do with Ngozi, and here, too, the story tries to be honest rather than satisfying, though I think in the end it manages to be both. The easy ending, the one that feels good for 10 seconds and teaches you nothing, is the one where Ngozi is dragged out by security, screaming and thrown in a cell, and we all cheer. and I understand the appetite for it. I feel it too. When someone tries to destroy a good person with a lie, something in us wants to see them broken in public, wants the hand of God to come down. That hunger is human. But a story that only feeds that hunger leaves you a little worse than it found you, a little more in love with other people's ruin, and I do not want to do that to you. So watch what actually happened, because it is more powerful than vengeance. Mama Naneka did not have Ngozi arrested that afternoon. Planting the brooch was a crime, real and serious, and the family made that completely clear. A formal report was filed, documented, the footage preserved, a lawyer's letter sent, so that there could never again be any doubt about what had happened, and so that Ngozi understood that the law had her, fully, and that whether it closed its hand was now a matter of grace and not of weakness. The family did not pretend the crime away. To pretend it away would have been its own insult to Adaeze, a quiet suggestion that what was done to her did not really count. But Mama Neneka, who had buried a husband and outlived most of her friends and learned things about people that no amount of money can teach you, said one more thing to Ngozi before she let her be driven home in disgrace. "You came into my house," the old woman said, "and you tried to take a young woman's good name, which is the only thing she owns, that I cannot give back to her if you succeed in stealing it. That is a wickedness, Ngozi, and you will carry it. The law will decide what the law decides, and you have earned whatever comes. But let me tell you the sentence that no court will give you, and that you have already begun to serve. You will spend the rest of your life being the kind of person who would do this. You will know it every morning when you look in the glass. No bag, no holiday, no rich husband can buy back the moment you decided that another woman's destruction was a fair price for your comfort. I am old, my dear, and I promise you, of all the things a person can lose, the heaviest to live without is your own respect for yourself. You have just thrown yours away over a brooch. That is the real punishment. The court is only paperwork, and that, more than handcuffs, was the thing that finally broke Ngozi, the recognition, arriving too late, of exactly what she had spent herself to become. As for Chiamaka and Verana, the story did not forget them. Because justice that only reaches the dramatic villain and ignores the everyday one is not really justice. In the weeks that followed, as part of a long overdue review of the entire retail division, prompted in no small part by a certain customer experience report and by the chairman's own infamous morning of truth, the conduct at the Adeola Odeku branch was formally examined. The footage from that rainy Tuesday was watched in a quiet office in Ikoyi by people with the power to act on it. Chiamaka was not fired in a screaming scene. She was fired in the way that actually ends careers, through process. A documented finding of gross misconduct. The commission theft uncovered when the till records were properly audited, the pattern of it stretching back through other staff, other months. She lost her job, and she lost it on paper in a way that would follow her to the next interview and the one after that. But the company did one more thing, and this is the part I am proudest of in the whole story, because it is the part that actually changes the world a little. Instead of just punishing one woman, it changed the rule. Adaeze, by then leading customer experience for the entire division, wrote the new floor policy herself, and the company adopted it across every branch. It was short. It said, in effect, every person who walks through these doors is greeted, served, and respected, regardless of what they are wearing, what they are carrying, or what you have decided they can afford. It said that a customer's worth is never to be judged by their appearance, and that any staff member found doing so would be retrained, and if they would not learn, removed. And at the bottom, Adaeze added one line that became, without anyone planning it, a kind of motto whispered between the floor staff in all the branches. You never know who you are talking to. So talk to everyone like they matter. Because they do. There was a quieter scene too that I do not want to skip, because the loud confrontations are not really where people change. People change in the small rooms. Some months after all of it had settled, Adaeze went back to Verana, not in triumph. She went on an ordinary working day as the head of the division, to see the branch the way her own policy said every branch should now be seen, through the eyes of whoever walked in. Chiamaka was long gone, but Bisola was still there. Bisola, who had mocked Adaeze's canvas shoes, who had hissed at her, who had laughed loudest that rainy Tuesday. And Bisola did not, at first, recognize the calm, well-dressed woman who came through the glass doors, until she did, and the color drained out of her face, and she stood there waiting, the way you wait for a blow you know you have earned. Adaeze could have done anything. She had all the power in that room now. The wheel had turned completely. And everyone who has ever been humiliated knows the sweetness that was available to her in that moment, the chance to make Bisola feel 1 ounce of what Bisola had made her feel. She did not take it. "Bisola," she said, "good afternoon. I am not here about the past. I am here to see how the branch is doing." And then, after a pause, because she was not a saint and she was not going to pretend the past had not happened, "I will only say one thing about before. The way you treated me and the way we all watched that old woman get treated, it was wrong. You know it was. I am not here to punish you for it. I am here to ask you to be different now, with the next person who walks in looking like they cannot afford anything. Because one of them changed my whole life, and you never ever know which one it will be." Bisola, who had braced for cruelty and received instead the one thing she did not know how to defend against, which was grace, began quietly to cry. And Adaeze did not gloat over the tears, and she did not embrace her either, and pretend they were now friends, because that would have been false. She simply nodded, and went to inspect the stockroom, and left Bisola to sit with the difference between the person who had walked out of that shop in the rain and the person who had just walked back in. That, I think, is what mercy actually looks like. Not weakness, not forgetting. Just refusing to become the thing that hurt you, even when you finally have the power to. A year and some months after a rainy Tuesday, Obiora and Adaeze were married. It was not the wedding of the films with the 30 million naira flowers and the helicopter. Adaeze refused that, and Obiora, who had learned by then that her no was usually wiser than his yes, agreed. It was large because their lives were large now, but at the center of it was something small and true. She wore a dress she had helped design. He cried during his own vows, which the magazines found astonishing, because they had spent years calling him the coldest man in Lagos, and did not understand that cold is very often just a word for a man who has never once been seen. Mama Nneka gave a gift, not the jewelry everyone expected. She gave them a single brass key and a folded paper, and when Adaeze opened it, she found it was the Ndito building in Yaba, the old building that had once held the bakery, where a girl had worked nights to pay for her diploma, 1 semester at a time. Mama Nneka had quietly bought it. "For your foundation," the old woman said, "because I know you, and I know you will not rest in all this comfort while there are girls out there doing what you did. So build something there. Help them, and do it where it started." And she did. The Adaeze Foundation, when it opened in that building in Yaba a year later, was not a charity that handed out money, because Adaeze had learned, from the day she pushed a tray of car keys back across a table, that money handed to a person is not the same as a chance built into them. It was a training and scholarship center for young women from poor homes, the bakery shift girls, the ones paying for 1 semester at a time, the ones who knew the price of everything and could afford none of it. It taught them. It paid their fees. It placed them in real jobs. And the first thing every single intake of girls was told, on their first morning, was the story of a brooch in a handbag and an old woman in rubber slippers, and the lesson that came with it, which was not "be kind and you will marry a billionaire," because that is a lottery and a lie. The lesson was this: your character is the one asset no one can take from you, in good times or in ruin, unless you yourself decide to spend it. Guard it like it is the only thing you own, because on your worst day it may be. Emeka, Adaeze's brother, finished medical school. He is a doctor now, in a teaching hospital in Enugu, and he still, sometimes, sends his sister a drawing of the human heart with all the parts labeled, the way he did when he was a boy and she was working nights so that he could one day learn its real names. She keeps every one of them in a drawer in her office, above the foundation that her own heart built. So that is the story. Now, let me tell you what I actually think about it. Because I promised you the truth and not just a happy ending, and because I do not believe a story is finished until someone has been honest about what it is and is not. I do not believe for 1 second that the world reliably works this way. That is the hard part. And I will not lie to you to make you feel warm. For every Adaeze whose kindness is finally seen, there are 1,000 good people who give their last money to a stranger and are never repaid by anything except the quiet, unglamorous knowledge that they did the right thing. Kindness is not a slot machine. You do not put goodness in and pull the handle and watch a billionaire fall out. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something, and what they are selling will leave you bitter when the jackpot does not come, because you will start to suspect that your goodness was a failed investment, when in fact it was never an investment at all. But here is the thing I do believe, completely, and it is the reason I told you this story at all. The way you treat the person who can do nothing for you is the truest thing about you. It is truer than your words, truer than your manners in front of important people, truer than what you post and what you say you believe. It is the one place where your real character lives, because it is the one place where there is no audience, no reward, no reason to perform. And the world is absolutely full of moments where you get to choose, quietly, with no camera and no chairman watching, who you are going to be to someone who cannot fight back and cannot repay you. The old woman in the rubber slippers is real. Maybe not a secret billionaire, almost never that. But a tired stranger, a worn-down colleague, a person everyone else has decided does not count. Those are real, and they are in front of you all the time, and what you do in those small, unwatched moments is, in the end, the whole sum of your life. Adaeze did not give her transport money because she calculated it would pay off. She gave it because, when she saw someone being treated the way the world treated her, she could not stand to add her silence to it. That is the part you can actually take home. Not the mansion. The choice. The mansion was luck. The choice was hers, and the choice is the only part that was ever in her power, and it is the only part that is in yours. So be an Adaeze, not because a billionaire might be watching. Be an Adaeze because, on the day no one is watching at all, that is still exactly who you would want to have been. If this story moved you, do something with it that is bigger than a like. Be kind to one person today who can do absolutely nothing for you, and tell no one you did it. That is the real subscription. But, the small one helps the channel too. So if you have come this far with me, drop a comment and tell me, honestly, have you ever met an old woman in rubber slippers? And what did you do? I will read everyone.